Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, April 19th, 2021. I am Dave Biddle flying solo on today's show. So there's a ton to get into, obviously, with the Buckeyes coming off their spring game a couple days ago at the Horseshoe. It was great being back in Ohio Stadium. I wish they were tackling and playing real football. I'm sure all of you do as well, but it was still good seeing the Scarlet and Gray out there. And let's take a look at the guys that stood out at the spring game and really during spring in general, since you can't take away too much from the spring game, and what it means moving forward for the Buckeyes this fall. Let's start right at the top with the quarterbacks. Good day for CJ Stroud and Kyle McCord. Not so much for Jack Miller. That's the spring game in a nutshell. And that pretty much backs up what I was hearing. Not necessarily with Jack Miller. I wasn't hearing he was having a bad spring. I think that he just had a bad day. I was definitely hearing he was behind CJ Stroud in the running. And I was hearing don't count out Kyle McCord. And now you can see why. But CJ Stroud just carries himself like he knows he's the guy. You see the way his teammates interact with him. I thought he threw the ball well. I don't think he did anything spectacular. I do think when they're going live, that'll help CJ Stroud maybe more than the other guys because he's more mobile, certainly more mobile than Jack Miller. Kyle McCord showed better mobility than I expected, that's for sure. And, when I say that, I've seen his high school film, and he certainly, was able to throw on the run and did look mobile, had some good runs in high school. But, to do it against Ohio State's defense, I was like, okay, Kyle McCord's a little more mobile than I thought. But what really impressed me with Kyle McCord's the way he throws the ball. He's got a very high ceiling. You could say maybe he's got a higher ceiling than Stroud does just as a passer. But I really liked what Stroud did. Both those guys, I think, helped himself. And if I had to guess right now, I do think Jack Miller is going to stick around this season. You never know how things are going to play out. Last year didn't count as a year of eligibility. This year, if he plays in 4 games or less, he can redshirt. So he would still have, if that happens, he would still have 4 years of eligibility left at whatever school he ends up transferring to if he does transfer. I think a lot of people are now saying that Jack Miller is going to transfer, this summer. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to stick around. There's only going to be 3 scholarship quarterbacks on this roster. I think Ryan Day is going to get Jack Miller to stick around. So we'll see what happens. I think CJ Stroud's going to be the starter. Like I've said all along, since the season ended. I think I've said that on the show many times. I do think CJ Stroud's going to be the starter, but Kyle McCord looked good as well. So that's going to be fun to see how those guys look and if the pecking order stays the same, at least from what we're hearing as far as the pecking order, where it's CJ Stroud and the other 2 guys battling for number 2. And from what I saw, Kyle McCord might end up being that number 2, but it looks like CJ Stroud will be the starting quarterback. All right, so much to get into. Let's move on to Jack Sawyer, the absolute star of the scrimmage. Yes, he was going against backup offensive tackles for the Buckeyes, and those backup offensive tackles were not like the typical backup offensive tackles like DeJuan Jones and Enoch Vamahi. More on that later. Just a little hint here. When DeJuan Jones and Enoch Vamahi and Luke Whippler are your backups and Josh Fryer, you're stacked on the offensive line. We'll get to that later. But so, yeah, he was going up against backups, but we talked to Thayer Munford after the game, and he said Jack Sawyer's been doing that in practice against everybody. Maybe not to that extent. And Jack Sawyer, if you haven't heard, there was 4 sacks total in the game. Again, they're playing touch football. They're not actually tackling the quarterbacks. There were 4 sacks total in the game, both teams combined. Jack Sawyer himself had 3 of those. He was just tearing it up. And there was, I counted a few other times when he had really good pressure on the quarterback, and didn't get a sack. So, it wasn't just he had those 3 plays where he got sacks, credited for a sack. He was disruptive all day. So get excited about Jack Sawyer. When we talked to Larry Johnson about a week and a half ago, he mentioned they're going to find a role for him, and you can easily see why. Is he going to be a starter? No, but he's not going to just be playing in garbage time either. He's going to be out there when the game is on the line. They're going to, just like they did last year, they're going to have 5 defensive ends that they're going to rotate almost evenly. The best are going to play the most, your 2 best. So maybe you have to think Tyreek Smith's going to get the most snaps, Zach Harrison, those 2 are going to get the most snaps. But I really think Javonte Jean-Baptiste, Tyler Friday, and Jack Sawyer are going to rotate really evenly. We saw the same thing last year. It's just they're losing Jonathan Cooper, and they're entering Jack Sawyer. So you lose a 5th-year senior local kid, and you enter a true freshman local kid from right here in Columbus. Koopa's from Gahanna, Jack Sawyer from Pick North. So get excited about Jack Sawyer. He looks like an absolute stud. And man, I mean, maybe I shouldn't write off the idea that he could start. I don't think he's going to start. He's not going to beat out Tyreek Smith and Zach Harrison yet, but this will be his only season as a backup. I'm confident saying that. Jack Sawyer, get excited about him. All right. Speaking of getting excited, this is the best wide receiving core that I can ever remember at Ohio State. You know, I have watched this team closely as a fan since I was a little kid. I've entering my 20th year on the beat now. Yeah, I'm old. And this is the best wide receiving core, and I can't even think of a close second. These guys are loaded. It's unbelievable to me. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to be the third best receiver on this team if it's not Marvin Harrison Jr. I'll get to that in a second. Jamison Williams. I mean, he was the number 3 last year. He looks good, and I'm demoting him. I mean, it's nothing against him. It's just I think Jackson Smith-Njigba and Marvin Harrison, are going to be the third and fourth best receivers on this team. Maybe not in that order. And Jamison Williams, if he's your 5th best receiver, look out. And they'll get Julian Fleming back healthy eventually. I was really encouraged by Emeka Egbuka. He, number 1 wide receiver in the country, right? So I should be excited about him. But I heard that was more based on potential, and his hands weren't as consistent as they should be yet. And it was really just based on his, athletic ability and his size and his speed. I tell you what, again, we got to be careful not to put too much stock in the spring game, but he was catching everything. Diving catches, balls thrown behind him, he was catching. I mean, Emeka Egbuka looked like the number 2 wide receiver in the country. And the reason I say that is because Marvin Harrison Jr. looked like the number 1 wide receiver in the country. I mean, it's unbelievable when you have those 2 guys to what they already have. This is how things happen, like G. Scott Jr., moving to tight end. And he was banged up, didn't play in the spring game, had a little bit of a pulled hammy. But G. Scott Jr. would be a starting wide receiver at, most Big Ten schools. He's moving to tight end, flex tight end for the Buckeyes. They're absolutely loaded. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, Emeka Egbuka might be the number 7 wide receiver on this team. It's insane to me how loaded they are. And Brian Hartline coaching these guys up. Marvin Harrison Jr. has grown 2 inches and has added 15 pounds in less than a year. Nice little late growth spurt there for him. He was about 6'2", 190. Now he's every bit of 6'4", 205. And man, does he look like an NFL player. The way he catches the ball, he reminds me, I saw somebody on Bucknuts say this, so I'm going to give credit where it's due. I can't remember who said it, but I heard somebody say, is it too early to start the AJ Green comparisons? I don't think it is. I've watched a lot of AJ Green being a Bengals fan. That's exactly what he looks like. And maybe it's because he's wearing the number 18. That helps too. But 6'4", always catching the ball away from his body with his hands, not trapping it against his chest where you can easily bounce off your chest. Marvin Harrison Jr. looks like he is going to be a stud from day one. Then again, I mean, how much – there's only one ball, but you have Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and all those other guys. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and catch 50 balls this year, but, man, he's going to be a big part of this wide receiver rotation. I have no doubt about it. Marvin Harrison Jr. looks unbelievably good. All right, let's move on. Really excited about a couple young corners. I really was curious to see how these young corners looked. I thought Legend Cavazos was going to be the guy that maybe showed out. Turns out he's a little banged up, did play, but was a little limited. 2 guys who played really well, a couple of redshirt freshmen, Ryan Watts and Cam Martinez. Ryan Watts, man, if this works out, you're talking about a tall, fast, looks pretty physical corner out there, 6'3", 190 pounds. I mean, he's really filled out, and he came in. It's not like he's grown. He came in at 6'3", 180 last year and rolled early. He's added at least 10 pounds. He looks good out there. He had a really nice interception on Jack Miller, jumped the route, the only interception of the day. So they need young corners to step up. A couple are going to join the team here in June with, of course, Ja'Kalen Johnson and Jordan Hancock, 2 of the top corner recruits in the country in the 2021 class. 2 of the few guys in that class that did not enroll early. They had 15 guys enroll early, which is the most Ohio State's ever had. They had 14 the previous year, so it's becoming a trend, but 15 was still the most. So Hancock and Ja'Kalen Johnson, I expect at least one of those guys to be in the rotation. I think both those guys will play. I think one of those guys will play like when the game is on the line, just because they need young corners to step up. But Ryan Watts and Cam Martinez looked really good to me. Ryan Watts with that interception and just the way he played overall, I mean, that could be a big weapon. If you have a 6'3" corner that can flip his hips and can run, I mean, there's 6'3" corners out there, but a lot of them just aren't athletic enough to play the position. He looks really, really good. That's going to be like the tallest corner that I can remember. So excited about Ryan Watts, young man out of Texas, was a 4-star recruit. Not really a high 4-star, almost like a low 4-star recruit, which for Ohio State's almost like an under the radar guy. If you get like a low 4-star, life is good when you get a low 4-star is like an under the radar guy for Ohio State. Ryan Watts looks really good to me. Cam Martinez looks really good to me. Mr. Football in the state of Michigan his senior year. Gatorade Player of the Year. But people weren't sure where he was going to play. He was a quarterback. And, he was a really, he was tough. Everybody knew really fast, good return man, Player of the Year in the state of Michigan. And Buckeye stole him away. And if he didn't go to Ohio State, he was going to go to Northwestern, by the way. It wasn't like they stole him away from one of the Michigan schools. He was too smart. He wasn't going to go to one of the Michigan schools. So, but I digressed. Cam Martinez as a slot corner looks really good to me. He's physical. You can just tell that he just is one of those guys with a lot of dog in him. Again, I'm not comparing him. I said this after the game. I'm not comparing him to Antoine Winfield, but it's like, because he's like my favorite corner to ever play at Ohio State. I'm not comparing Cam Martinez to that, but you see some of these like shorter corners. You wonder if are they big enough? It's like if you got the dog in you, it doesn't matter. He's got that dog in him, and I really like what Cam Martinez brings to the table. He's fast. You can just tell he just loves football. So number 10 was impressive to me out there, as well as number 16 Ryan Watts. Cam Martinez wearing that number 10. It's been pretty good at the Buckeyes over the years. All right, running backs. Travion Henderson looked good to me. His stats aren't going to jump out at you. 6 carries, 26 yards. But again, they didn't have to tackle him. His burst looked good to me. He caught the ball well out of the backfield. Again, the stats aren't going to, jump out at you. 5 catches, 29 yards, but only 5 targets. He caught all 5 passes, showed good hands, showed good burst. Really like what I saw out of him. I think he's definitely going to be one of the top 2 running backs on the team this year. Maybe top 3. Certainly, he's going to be a guy that from day one is going to be in the mix. And I think, as I've said many times on the show, I think by the end of the year, if he's not the number 1 running back on the team, he'll be in the top 2 by midseason, not just the end of the year. By midseason, I think he's going to be one of the top 2 running backs on this team, and probably along with Mayan Williams. I think those are going to be the top 2 guys. Master Teague, I'm not ruling him out. I think he's going to be in the mix. Something tells me that Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams are going to be the top 2 backs midseason. I also like what I saw to Marcus Crowley, though. Don't discount Marcus Crowley. He looked good as a true freshman a couple years ago in 2019, had that torn ACL in November of 2019, and really had some setbacks in his recovery because he was trying to, train on his own due to the pandemic and everything. So, but he played the national championship game, if you remember. He was finally healthy by then, and with Trey Sermon going out and then being a little banged up, they gave, Marcus Crowley some reps there in the second half of the national championship game. So Marcus Crowley looked good too. I think Marcus Crowley is going to at least be in the mix, and one of these guys, they got 6 scholarship running backs. They're not all going to stay healthy. They're going to have a couple guys get injured, at least one get injured. So you need depth. You need depth. So I thought, Marcus Crowley, that was good to see him out there looking good. And, but Travion Henderson was the one I was excited about. So great seeing him out there for the first time in the scarlet and gray. Linebackers, Taraja Mitchell flashed. I think now as a 4th-year player, the light has come on for him, and he doesn't have guys in front of him. It's his turn. I think Taraja Mitchell is going to be a solid starter, if not better than that, at the will linebacker spot. He looked good to me. He's slimmed down. He was flying through there. Really like what I saw to Taraja Mitchell, young man out of Virginia Beach. Young man, I mean, gosh, feels like these guys are young. He's technically a senior now. He can come back next year if he wants, since last year didn't count. Never redshirted. So we'll see. I tend to think he's going to have a good enough year where he's going to go pro. I'm not saying he's going to be like an early round pick or anything, but if he's like a 4th or 5th round pick, I think he's going to go pro, and he could work himself into maybe being a 3rd round pick. Just getting a little ahead of myself there, talking about the 2022 draft. But Taraja Mitchell looked good to me. I thought Craig Young looked really good as that hybrid. He's probably going to be a starter there at that hybrid, which their base defense this year is going to take the Sam off the field in most cases, not if they're playing Wisconsin probably, and have that hybrid in there. And Craig Young looks good to me. Hybrid, outside linebacker, safety is what that position is going to be. The bullet. And number 15, Craig Young, 6'4", 220 pounds, can run really 225. And he's the biggest guy they have at that position. I mean, Ronnie Hickman looks good to me too. Ronnie Hickman is probably going to be the backup there. He's 6'1", 205. And that's more like the typical size at that position. So Craig Young, man, that's a nice weapon there. Kind of like what I was saying with Ryan Watts at corner. Get Craig Young out there playing that hybrid at that size, that speed. He's like the size of Josh Perry out there playing a hybrid. He looks like Josh Perry out there. And he's faster than Joshua. So you got better call Joshua. Joshua likes to be called Joshua. It says that on his Twitter page. Joshua, not Josh. So Joshua, if you're listening to the show, like I'm sure you are, Mr. Perry, it's Joshua. But I really like what I saw out of Craig Young and Ronnie Hickman, like I said. Cody Simon, I like what I saw out of him. Again, it would be really nice if they were tackling, because you can see how he could shed blocks and bring a guy down. How is he missing tackles? Is he not missing tackles? So tough to get a gauge. I want to see, it's easier to tell with an outside linebacker in coverage how they look. Middle linebacker, when he's trying to stuff the run and they're just thudding up, it's tough to tell. But I've been hearing good things about Cody Simon, and the fact that he was taking the first team reps with Dallas Gant out this spring says a lot to me. And again, I've been hearing nice things about him, so good to see Cody Simon out there. But Taraja Mitchell really stood out to me, and Craig Young the most. This is a loaded offensive line, like I was saying earlier. This is I think Back said it best on last week's show. This year's offensive line is this year's version of the best offensive line ever at Ohio State. It's going to be up there, though. All joking aside, I still think 2013 might be the gold standard. That was the line that had, it was just loaded with future NFL guys, all the way down. Like Andrew Norwell, Corey Linsley, Jack Mewhort, Taylor Decker, Marcus Hall. I don't think Marcus Hall made it in the NFL, but his main backup was Pat Elflein as a redshirt freshman. So that 2013 line was absolutely loaded. Go way back to 1994. You had Orlando Pace and Corey Stringer on the same line. The rest of the line wasn't loaded, though. But, you have Corey Stringer and Orlando Pace on the same line. By default, that's going to be one of the best lines ever in college football. So I would go probably 2013 and 1994 is the best lines. This line's going to be right up there, and this line's going to be deeper. I mean, I love the starters. Left to right's probably going to be Thayer Munford, either Matt Jones or Harry Miller at left guard, and whoever's not the left guard is going to be the center. That's not etched in stone, but I think that's how it's going to go. And then at right guard, Paris Johnson, and then right tackle, Nick Petit-Ferrer. And then the backups, when you have DeJuan Jones, Enoch Vamahi, Luke Whippler, and Josh Fryer as backups, I mean, it's unbelievable to me. Those are your top 4 backup offensive linemen, and Vamahi's playing tackle. Whippler looks good in there at center. Fryer has really been, that's one of the underrated stories of spring is Josh Fryer, a redshirt freshman, really stepping up and proving that he's going to be on the 2 deep. And, he looked really good out there. Again, it's tough to tell when they're not really playing football, but at least with offensive linemen, you can tell. I mean, they're not tackling anyway. They're just trying to push defensive linemen, out of the way on running plays and not let them get to the quarterback. So you can get a little bit of a gauge on offensive linemen even when they're not going live. And Josh Fryer, you can see why they like him. He's a big guy at 6'6", 315 that moves well. Former basketball player. So a lot like DeJuan Jones. I think that's a huge reason he moves so well. He's just a mammoth guy at 6'8", 360. That's what they list him as. I would bet anything he's 380 or more. And he's at least 6'8". He looks like he's like 6'9", 380. So those are your backup offensive linemen. That's crazy to me. DeJuan Jones, Enoch Vamahi, Luke Whippler, Josh Fryer. We talk a lot about the starters, and rightfully so. I want to give the backups a little love there because that's how you know your offensive line is loaded, when you got guys that would be starting not just in the Big Ten, but programs across the country, Power 5 programs that are backups. I love that because, again, depth is so important in football. Guys are going to get hurt. One of those guys will end up being probably in the starting lineup. I mean, maybe all 5 starting offensive linemen will stay healthy and produce. Good chance one of those guys will get hurt or will not produce, and one of these backups will end up being a starter. So great to have that depth. And offensive line is going to be a strength. Defensive line is also going to be a strength. That's a broken record. Every year, Larry Johnson fields a great defensive line. This year, that'll be no exception. We talked about Jack Sawyer and the defensive ends earlier. I like the defensive tackles, though. I still need to see it from Teron Vincent, but I like that he's finally, according to the coaches and his teammates, living up to that number 1 D tackle in the country billing. He's entering his 4th year now. Another guy that feels like he's a young guy, but entering his 4th year. Those 2018 guys, Taraja Mitchell, we were talking about him earlier. It seems like they're young, but they've been here now 4 years, or entering their 4th year, I should say. So this defensive line is going to be loaded. Haskell Garrett missed spring with a foot injury, but him coming back is absolutely huge. I don't need to tell you guys that. And then we'll see. I think Jerron Cage is a guy we probably don't talk about enough. He had a really nice play when he bolted in there for a tackle for loss in the spring game. He's a guy that's really worked his butt off. He's going to be a 5th-year senior and, 305 pounds. I think he can not take over for Tommy Togiai and not, replace what Togiai did, but can be, more than solid, where there won't be a huge drop-off. Of interest, Cage is the one that started against Alabama in the national championship game when Togiai was out. So that tells you what they think about Cage already. So I think there's a good chance it could be Haskell Garrett and Cage as the starters. If not, it'll be Haskell Garrett and Teron Vincent, with Cage rotating in a lot. Either way, those are going to be your top 3 guys, and they're going to play a lot. Then I think it's going to be Antoine Jackson is going to be that 4th D tackle. So they're very veteran at D tackle. I really like that. So those are your top 4 D tackles, and we'll see who steps up after that. I like Mike Hall a lot. He's not here yet, though, but I love him. I like Mike Hall a lot. I think he's going to play as a true freshman. They got some other guys they're working in there. We saw Jaden McKenzie in there, 3rd-year sophomore at D tackle. Jacoby Cohen at D tackle, redshirt freshman at Charlotte. He batted down a pass. He looked pretty good to me. Jacoby Cohen looked pretty good to me out there. So they've got some depth there. They got some veteran guys, and then they got some some young guys as third teamers. You know, when you think about Cohen and McKenzie and those guys, and Mike Hall coming in, and then Tyleek Williams missed this spring game, but he's a big guy. Like they have a 330-pound plugger in there with Tyleek Williams, a true freshman that enrolled early. So they've got a nice mix of the top 4 guys are veterans, and then you round out that 3 deep with some young guys. So really like what I'm seeing on both sides of the line for the Buckeyes. And one more real quick thing. I talked about the best wide receiving core I can remember at Ohio State, and it's unbelievable. You know what's crazy? On top of that, you're adding in the best tight end we've seen at Ohio State in a long time. Jeremy Ruckert's going to go down as the best tight end, since at least Ricky Dudley, and might be the best. I'm going to go way back on you guys. Might be the best since John Frank. John Frank, going way back on you guys. Dr. John Frank, he was a stud. That's when I was a super little kid. When I first started watching Ohio State football, he was catching everything out there. So that's still my gold standard when it comes to Ohio State tight ends is John Frank. And Jeremy Ruckert coming back is absolutely huge. He's going to be a weapon out there. Cade Stover looked good to me. Cade Stover was catching the ball well. He's probably going to be the backup there. Mitch Rossi's going to play a decent amount, 5th-year senior. He's basically going to be a fullback. They threw the ball to him 3 times and all incomplete. Stroud was trying to get him the ball. Stroud only had 4 incompletions, and 3 of them were to Rossi. So I thought in the first half, at least. In the first half, he only had 4 incompletions. So trying to get the ball to the fullback there. Mitch Rossi, number 34, didn't work out too well. All right, so we can come up for air now. A lot to get into here on the Bucknuts morning. What is it, 21? Thanks for flying solo with me here on this edition of the Bucknuts Morning 5. I am Dave Biddle. I appreciate all of you for tuning in. I hope all of you have a great day. Let's hear that Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.